The call came at 2:47 a.m. Singapore time, jerking me from the deepest sleep I'd had in weeks. My phone's harsh ring cut through the hotel room's silence like a blade, and my mother's voice cracked through the speaker before I'd even fully opened my eyes. "Daniel, thank God you answered." Her words tumbled out in panicked gasps. "It's Grandpa Joe." According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. He's had another heart attack. They don't think he's going to make it this time. I bolted upright, suddenly wide awake. Grandpa Joe, my father's father, the man who'd built Morrison Industries from a single hardware store into a $50 million manufacturing empire. At 91, he'd been the cornerstone of our family and the company for as long as I could remember. What hospital? I was already reaching for my laptop, pulling up flight schedules. I can be there in 18 hours if I leave now. St. Mary's downtown, but Daniel? Her voice wavered with what I assumed was grief. "Before you come home, there's something you need to know. Grandpa's been asking for the company transfer documents. The lawyers are saying if he doesn't sign them soon, with the way inheritance laws work, the company could end up tied up in probate for years. The board is panicking." My stomach dropped. 6 months ago, Grandpa had announced his intention to transfer ownership of Morrison Industries to me on my 30th birthday. Still 3 weeks away. But he'd always been a stickler for proper timing and ceremony. The plan was to make the announcement at the company's annual meeting, with all the pomp and circumstance befitting a generational transition. "He's been asking for you specifically," Mom continued, and I could hear what sounded like hospital monitors beeping in the background. "But he also said if you can't make it in time, he trusts me to handle the business side of things. As his power of attorney, I could sign the transfer documents on his behalf, just to make sure everything's secure." Something cold settled in my chest, but I pushed it aside. This was my mother, the woman who'd raised me, who'd stood by Dad during his final battle with cancer 5 years ago. She was asking to help save the family business, not harm it. "Do whatever you think is best, Mom. I trust your judgment completely. I'll be on the next flight out." "I love you, sweetheart. Grandpa's going to be so proud of how you've handled everything." The line went dead, and I was already throwing clothes into my suitcase, my mind racing between grief for my grandfather and worry about the company's future. The Singapore expansion deal I'd been negotiating for the past month would have to wait. Family came first. The 20-hour journey back to Chicago felt like purgatory. 3 flights, 2 layovers, and countless attempts to call Mom for updates that went straight to voicemail. Each time I tried to reach the hospital directly, I was told there was no Joseph Morrison admitted. I assumed they had him under a different name for privacy. The Morrison family had learned to be cautious about publicity after a kidnapping threat several years back. It wasn't until I was in the taxi from O'Hare, finally getting cell service that worked properly, that the first crack appeared in my mother's story. A text from my college roommate, Mike. "Dude, saw your grandpa at the country club yesterday. He was bragging about your Singapore deal and looking healthier than ever. Everything okay?" My blood went cold. Yesterday. Grandpa had been playing golf yesterday while I was getting a call about his deathbed. I immediately tried calling him directly, something I should have done 20 hours ago. The phone rang once before his familiar, robust voice answered. "Danny boy, how's Singapore treating you? Close that deal yet?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. Relief and confusion crashed over me simultaneously. "Grandpa, you're okay? Okay? I shot a 79 yesterday. At my age, that's better than okay. Why do you sound like you've seen a ghost?" The taxi suddenly felt too small, too hot. "Mom called me. She said you had a heart attack, that you were dying. I've been flying for 20 hours. "What?" His voice sharpened immediately. "Daniel, I haven't spoken to your mother in over a week. And my heart is fine. Had a full physical on Monday. Where are you right now? 10 minutes from home. My mouth felt dry as cotton. Grandpa, she said you wanted to sign the company transfer papers early, that you gave her power of attorney. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel? Grandpa's voice was deadly quiet. I never gave your mother power of attorney, and the only person authorized to handle company transfers is you and my lawyer, Richard Chen. Where is your mother now? I was already redirecting the taxi to Morrison Industries' headquarters. I don't know, but I think I'm about to find out. The Morrison Industries building stood 37 stories tall in downtown Chicago, its steel and glass facade reflecting the late afternoon sun. I'd grown up in this building, spent summers filing papers and learning the business from the ground up. Walking through the lobby should have felt like coming home. Instead, it felt like walking into a crime scene. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt endless. My key card still worked. Mom hadn't thought to disable it yet, which was her first mistake. The offices were mostly empty at 6 p.m., but I could see lights on in the boardroom at the end of the hall. I approached quietly, my business shoes silent on the carpeted hallway. Through the glass walls, I could see my mother seated at the head of the conference table, papers spread before her. Across from her sat Richard Chen, or at least, someone I didn't recognize wearing an expensive suit and holding documents. But this man wasn't Richard Chen. Richard was 68 years old, Korean-American, with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses. This man was maybe 40, Caucasian, with the kind of slicked-back hair that screamed con artist. I activated the voice recorder on my phone and quietly pushed open the door. So once we transfer the initial $4.2 million to the Cayman account, we can restructure the rest of the assets over the next 6 months, the fake lawyer was saying. The beauty of this power of attorney document is that it gives you complete control until Daniel returns and discovers what's happened. By then, the money will be safely offshore, and the company will be yours. My mother's voice was steady, businesslike, not the voice of a grieving woman dealing with a family emergency. And you're certain the documents will hold up if there's a challenge? Margaret, please. I've been forging legal documents for 15 years. Your father-in-law's signature is particularly easy. All those years of Christmas cards gave me plenty of practice samples. I felt like I was watching my entire world collapse in real time. My mother, the woman who'd read me bedtime stories, who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd held me while I cried at my father's funeral, was systematically stealing my inheritance and my grandfather's life's work. How soon can we move the money? Mom asked. The transfers are already in process. By tomorrow morning, Phase 1 will be complete. Morrison Industries will be hemorrhaging cash, and you'll be the only one in position to save it by taking full control. I stepped into the room. Interesting business meeting, Mom. The fake lawyer jumped so high he nearly knocked over his chair. My mother's face went through a fascinating sequence of expressions. Shock, guilt, fear, and then something I'd never seen before. Cold calculation. Daniel. She recovered faster than I expected. I thought you were still in Singapore. Funny thing about that heart attack story. Turns out Grandpa's fine. Shot a 79 yesterday, as a matter of fact. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it. Want to explain why you're transferring $4.2 million to the Cayman Islands using a forged power of attorney? The fake lawyer was edging toward the window, probably hoping for a fire escape that didn't exist on the 37th floor. I looked directly at him. Sit down. You're not going anywhere until we sort this out. My mother straightened in her chair, and I saw a flash of the woman who'd once been Dad's business partner before grief had supposedly driven her away from the company. You don't understand the situation, Daniel. The company is in trouble. Real trouble. I was trying to protect what your father built. By stealing it? By securing it? Her voice rose, and for the first time, I heard genuine emotion. Do you have any idea what it's been like? Watching Joe treat this company like his personal kingdom while I, your father's widow, get treated like an outsider? I helped build Morrison Industries too, Daniel. I deserved more than a pension and a pat on the head. I stared at her, pieces of a puzzle I'd never known existed suddenly clicking into place. How long have you been planning this? The fake lawyer cleared his throat. Perhaps we should discuss a resolution that benefits everyone. Shut up, I said without looking at him. Mom, I asked you a question. She met my eyes, and I saw 29 years of lies and resentment looking back at me. Since your father's funeral, Joe made it very clear that I was no longer family business. The company would pass to you, and I would get nothing. Nothing for 15 years of building this company alongside your father. Grandpa offered you a position on the board. You turned it down. A ceremonial position. No real power, no real say in decisions. I was supposed to smile and be grateful while watching strangers run the company I helped create. The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. I walked slowly to the conference table and picked up one of the forged documents. Grandpa's signature was indeed perfect. I could barely tell it from the real thing. $4.2 million, I said quietly. That's not just taking what you think you deserve. That's destroying the company. That money is earmarked for the new manufacturing facility in Ohio. Without it, we'll have to lay off 300 people. The company will survive. It always does. Under whose leadership? Yours? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mom, you haven't been involved in the business for 5 years. You don't know the contracts, the relationships, the market conditions. You'd run it into the ground within 6 months. I'm not stupid, Daniel. I'd hire the right people. With stolen money as your startup capital? The fake lawyer was getting nervous, constantly checking his phone. I realized he was probably waiting for confirmation that the money transfers had gone through. We were running out of time. I made a decision that would change everything. Here's what's going to happen, I said, pulling out my phone. First, I'm calling the real Richard Chen to stop any transfers that haven't gone through yet. I dialed as I spoke. Richard? It's Daniel Morrison. I need you to freeze all company accounts immediately. We have a situation. My mother shot to her feet. Daniel, don't... Second, I continued. I'm calling Grandpa to let him know his loving daughter-in-law tried to steal his company using a fake medical emergency. You can't do this to me. Her voice broke, and for a moment she looked like the grieving widow I thought I knew. I'm your mother. A mother who was willing to let me think my grandfather was dying so you could rob us both. I was already dialing Grandpa's number when my mother did something that surprised me. She laughed. Oh, Daniel. You still think you're so smart. She nodded to the fake lawyer who suddenly didn't look nervous anymore. Show him. The man reached into his briefcase and pulled out a tablet which he slid across the table to me. On the screen was a bank transfer confirmation. $4.2 million, transferred 30 minutes ago. While I was in the taxi, while I was discovering their plan, while I thought I still had time to stop them. The beauty of modern banking, Mom said, settling back into her chair with a satisfied smile. Transactions happen in real time. The money is already gone, Daniel. Hidden in accounts that don't exist on paper, protected by banking laws in countries that don't cooperate with U.S. investigations. I stared at the confirmation, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. You bankrupted the company. I freed myself from this family's control. She stood and gathered her papers. And there's nothing you can do about it. By the time lawyers get involved, by the time investigators trace the money, I'll be living very comfortably in a country without extradition treaties. The fake lawyer was packing his briefcase. His job apparently done. I realized this had all been theater. They'd never intended to negotiate or explain. They'd just been killing time while the final transfers processed. But my mother had made one crucial mistake. She'd assumed I was the same naive 29-year-old who'd left for Singapore a month ago. She hadn't considered what I'd learned during my time overseas, or why Grandpa had really sent me there. I smiled, and something in my expression made her step back. "You're right, Mom. The money is gone, and there's probably no way to get it back through normal legal channels." I pulled out my phone again. Good thing I don't plan to use normal legal channels. The call connected on the second ring. "Wei?" "Mr. Chen," I said in Mandarin, "this is Daniel Morrison. I need to execute the Singapore contingency we discussed. Full implementation." My mother's face went pale. "What are you doing?" I switched back to English. "Something I should have done the moment I suspected you were lying. Mr. Chen, please proceed with the acquisition." "Daniel," the fake lawyer said slowly. "What acquisition?" I ended the call and looked at my mother. "The one you didn't know about because you've been out of the business for 5 years. While you were planning to steal $4.2 million, I was closing a deal to sell Morrison Industries to Yangtze Manufacturing for $50 million. The silence in the room was absolute. "That's impossible," Mom whispered. "Is it?" "I've been in Singapore for a month negotiating the terms. Grandpa knew the domestic market was getting too competitive, so we decided to go global. The contracts were signed yesterday, pending one final condition: my approval as incoming CEO. I walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The beautiful thing about international business law, Mom, is that it moves fast. Much faster than domestic transfers. While your 4.2 million was crossing the ocean, 50 million was crossing back the other way." My phone buzzed with a notification. The Yangtze funds had cleared. As of 10 minutes ago, Morrison Industries is owned by Yangtze Manufacturing, with myself as the American CEO under a 10-year contract. Every employee keeps their job, everyone gets a 20% raise, and the company gets access to Asian markets worth billions. My mother sank into her chair, the color completely drained from her face. "But here's the thing," I continued, turning back to face her. "Yangtze was very interested in the company's full financial picture, including any recent unusual transactions. They're particularly good at international investigations, having dealt with corporate theft in dozens of countries." The fake lawyer was backing toward the door, but I wasn't finished. "Oh, and Mom? That power of attorney you forged? The one that gave you legal authority over Grandpa's assets?" I smiled. "Those assets no longer exist. Grandpa sold his entire stake to Yangtze this morning, retaining only emeritus status and a consulting fee." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You planned this." "I planned a business expansion. You handed me a perfect reason to accelerate it." I looked at the fake lawyer, who was sweating despite the air conditioning. "I'd run if I were you. Yangtze's security team is very thorough, and they don't like people who steal from their new investments." The man didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed his briefcase and bolted from the room, leaving my mother and me alone. For a long moment, we just stared at each other across the conference table that had hosted Morrison family meetings for 20 years. "You destroyed me," she said finally. "You destroyed yourself. I just made sure you didn't take the company and 300 innocent employees down with you. I'm your mother, Daniel. How could you do this to me?" The question hit me harder than I expected. Looking at her now, defeated, desperate, suddenly looking every one of her 53 years, I felt a stab of the old love I'd carried for her my entire life. But then I remembered the calculated coldness in her voice when she'd talked about forging documents, the casual way she'd discussed destroying everything my grandfather had built. "A mother wouldn't have lied about her father-in-law's death to steal from her son," I said quietly. A mother wouldn't have been willing to destroy the family business out of spite. You stopped being my mother the moment you decided revenge was more important than family. I walked to the door, then paused. The FBI will probably want to talk to you about the international transfers. And Mom? That country with no extradition treaties? Yangtze has business interests there too. They're very good at finding people who take their money. I left her sitting alone in the boardroom, surrounded by the documents of her failed coup. 3 months later. The view from my new office was different. 42nd floor instead of 37th. But the Chicago skyline looked the same. What had changed was everything else. Morrison Industries was thriving under Yangtze's ownership. The injection of capital had funded not just the Ohio facility, but 3 additional manufacturing plants across the Midwest. Our workforce had grown from 800 to over 2,000 employees, and our products were now sold in 14 countries. Grandpa had adapted to his emeritus role with surprising enthusiasm, spending his days consulting on strategic decisions and teaching management principles to Yangtze's young executives. At 91, he was having the time of his life. My mother had been arrested 2 weeks after our confrontation. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit had tracked the stolen money through 6 different countries before Yangtze's investigative team located the final accounts. She was currently facing federal charges for wire fraud, forgery, and money laundering. Her lawyer had reached out twice requesting a meeting. I'd declined both times. I was working late, reviewing expansion plans for our new facility in Vietnam, when my assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Morrison? There's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's personal." I looked up to find my mother standing in the doorway. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. The confident woman who'd tried to steal my inheritance had been replaced by someone who looked fragile and lost. "Hello, Daniel." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "I heard you made bail." "House arrest, actually. This is one of my approved destinations." She sat down carefully, as if she were afraid the chair might collapse. I wanted to apologize. I leaned back, studying her face. For what, specifically? For lying about Joe's health. For trying to steal from you. For... She took a shaky breath. For forgetting that you were my son first, before you were my target. The words hung in the air between us. I could hear the truth in them, but also something else. A practiced quality that made me wonder if this was another performance. "Why now?" I asked. "Why come here?" "Because I'm probably going to prison, Daniel. 5 to 10 years, my lawyer thinks. And I didn't want to go without trying to make things right between us." I looked out the window at the city lights, thinking about the mother I'd thought I knew, and the woman sitting across from me now. "Do you want to know the hardest part about what you did?" I said finally. "It wasn't the money, or the betrayal, or even the fake emergency. It was realizing that you'd been planning it since Dad's funeral. 5 years, Mom. 5 years of looking me in the eye and planning to destroy me. I wasn't planning to destroy you. I was planning to take what should have been mine, by destroying everything I cared about. The company, my relationship with Grandpa, my trust in family. If that's not destruction, what is?" She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands folded in her lap. "I was angry," she said eventually. "So angry, for so long. Your father died and left me with nothing but memories, while Joe got to keep building his empire. You got to be the heir apparent while I got to be the grieving widow who needed to be protected from business stress. I felt invisible. So you decided to make yourself unforgettable. I decided to take back some control over my life." She looked up at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. "But you're right. I became someone I don't recognize. Someone who could lie to her son about his grandfather's health, who could steal from her own family. I don't know who that woman was." She was someone who chose revenge over everything else. Yes. The admission came out as a whisper. And I lost everything because of it. The money, my freedom, my relationship with you. All of it, for what? $4.2 million that I never even got to enjoy. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street 42 floors below. People walked back and forth like ants, each carrying their own stories, their own struggles, their own choices between right and wrong. What do you want from me, Mom? I want. She was crying now, quietly but steadily. I want my son back. I want to find some way to rebuild what I destroyed. I know I can't undo what I did, but maybe when I get out of prison, maybe we could try to start over. I turned back to face her. The woman sitting in my office looked nothing like the confident schemer who'd tried to steal my inheritance. This was someone broken by consequences, someone who'd finally realized the true cost of her choices. But it was also someone who'd spent 5 years lying to me with perfect skill. I don't know if I can trust you again, I said honestly. I don't know if I can look at you without wondering what you're really thinking, what you're really planning. I understand. But I sat back down at my desk. But you're still my mother. And maybe, if you serve your time and show that you've really changed, maybe we can find some way forward. I won't promise forgiveness, but I won't promise hatred either. She nodded, wiping her eyes with a tissue from her purse. That's more than I deserve. Probably. But it's what I can offer. She stood up slowly, like an old woman, though she was only 53. Thank you, Daniel. For listening, if nothing else. Mom? She paused at the door. The money you stole, it was recovered. All of it. The employees got their raises, the expansion moved forward. Nobody lost their jobs because of what you did. I thought you should know that. For the first time since she'd walked into my office, she smiled. It was a sad smile, but genuine. Your father would be proud of how you handled all this. You saved the company he loved. Grandpa and I saved it. Together. The way family is supposed to work. She nodded and walked away, leaving me alone in my office with the weight of choices made and consequences accepted. Outside, Chicago glittered in the darkness, full of people making decisions that would shape their futures. Some would choose wisely, others would choose poorly. All would live with the results. I turned back to my work, reviewing plans for a company that had survived betrayal and emerged stronger. Tomorrow, I would call Grandpa and tell him about my mother's visit. We would discuss strategy, make decisions, and continue building something worthy of the Morrison name. But tonight, I would finish these reports and then go home to an apartment I could afford because I'd chosen family loyalty over personal revenge, because I'd chosen to build rather than destroy. It had been the right choice, the only choice, even if it meant living with the memory of my mother's tears and the knowledge that some betrayals leave scars that never fully heal. The city hummed below, indifferent to human drama, eternal in its appetite for stories of ambition and consequence. And somewhere in that maze of lights and lives, my mother was learning the hardest lesson of all, that the price of revenge is always higher than anyone expects to pay.